Okay, so what I'd like to show you now is like how we can actually, the actual expansion part of what. Okay, so let's take this a step further. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start to mess with the phase. So basically, when you have something in parallel, it means you have a dry signal and a wet signal. Now, the wet signal, which is a distorted one, when you distort something, the waveform gets changed. So there's a certain amount of phase that's going on because the waveforms are being blended back together and it sort of changes the sound. But we can actually play with the phase even further to get like a different character out of the distortion when it kind of gets blended back in. And this is really easy to achieve. So what we do is, so see here under utilities in Ableton, for example, and I think a lot of plugins will have this, as long as there's a phase invert switch is what you're after. And in Ableton, you even have a phase invert preset on the utility. So here's the utility, and we put this before the saturation plugin on the auxiliary. And to phase invert, it's literally just this. It's just these phase buttons here where you can invert each channel, the left and the right. So that's now phase inverted. So now the phase is being flipped, it's hitting the distortion, and then it's being blended back into the original signal, but with a different phase. And it kind of creates a cleaner kind of sound. It almost starts to take certain frequencies out of the sound. And depending on where you set the volume levels of your output will determine how much of that phase element is going to be added, some of that phase kind of deficiency is going to be added. And it can do amazing things. It can make the kick drum feel an octave lower in some cases. Other times it can like just pull certain frequencies out of the sound, and again, you just do a gentle balancing of the gain stages, how much you're sending to something and how much you're letting back in again. And there's no science to this. It's just, it's a pure art form in the sense that there's no golden setting that works. You just have to just play with all the settings till you get a sound that you really like. Now, you can basically, with this idea is that you actually have an option now. You could have it with the phase invert plugin on or with it off, and you just basically choose which one has the sound that you prefer. The volume will dip a little bit with the phase inverted version, so we do have to sort of change our levels a little bit, but I think it'll be a bit more clear when I demonstrate this for you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play it first without the phase inversion, and then I'll add the phase inversion in, and then I'll start to mess with the balances of the levels again, and then let's check out what happens. See what it's doing to the low frequencies in this particular case, because like I said, every time you do this, you're going to get a completely different result. That's kind of why it's good, because you don't know what you're going to get. It's definitely affecting the low end quite a lot, almost taking it away. So to add some more control to this, what we can do is we can add an EQ. So let's take an EQ8 and actually, do you know what? No, I'm going to use the fab filter because you can see what I'm doing a lot better, because it will be larger in the screen and it will have a bit more of a cleaner sound as well. Right, so what we can do is we can set up high and low pass filters. So here's the low pass, the high pass filter. I always get them muddled up. And there's so okay, low cut, high cut. Let's call it that way. Now, what we can do is we can control what frequencies are going to that distortion plugin. which is really cool because that way we're only going to be distorting and phase inverting a particular range of that particular sound. So we have our phase inversion, an EQ rolling off frequencies, and then the actual saturation itself, which is then blended into our original. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move the filters around and try to dial in. This is where you can really start to dial in the sound, because the distortion's only going to affect the frequencies, which is coming through the EQ. So we get to choose exactly what frequencies are being processed. So let's give this a go. See how the signal just got really clean? It's like taken out some of the boxiness of the sound. It's kind of made it kind of thicker. It's just made it cleaner. You know, as like I said, it's going to sound different every time, but the real magic starts to happen when you apply these EQs. At first, when you first apply the phase, it's a bit like, yeah, I'm not quite so sure. But once you set these high and low pass filters, you really can dial in exactly where things are happening. If you listen, I was going to do one thing here. I'm going to listen to the kick drum of the break. Listen to what happens as I move the filter around. As it goes into the lower settings, the kick drum gets really clean, and as I take the high pass up, it starts to get a bit more murky again, and it's quite interesting. Just again, it's going to just depend on what you're doing. It'll be different every time, and this is why this is so great. I'm just going to A/B with the EQ as well, so you can hear what the EQ is actually doing to the circuit. Isn't that weird? Because basically we're distorting this range here, everything from like 50 to 500, all that kind of low end and low mid range has been phase inverted and distorted. But what it's actually done, it's actually opened up the mid range. So it actually sounds, it sounds really nice, I've got to admit. And again, I was going to just to demonstrate to you, like I'm just going to put it on solo, just so you can hear exactly what's being blended back in, and you'll see what I mean about the actual sound on its own sounds terrible, but when it's blended, it sounds amazing. See what I mean? Super cool technique, right? So yeah, I want you to give that a go for a second. And I have another bit to add on the end of this in a little bit as well. So yeah, give that a go.